Alright, so in this video we're going to go over the switch statement. And the switch statement is basically an alternative to the if statement. Normally when you use the if statement, it returns a true or false, and depending on the true or false, it will run code based on the result you get. And the switch statement is meant for multi-branch situations. So let's say you're generating a random number from 0 to 5, and you want a special case to happen to each and every single one of those numbers that you get. Normally you could do an if-else chain or an else-if chain, but normally that is not really, it isn't really liked amongst the coding community, as when you're doing if-else-if chains, the code executor goes all the way down through the entire chain until it reaches the end. But in switch case methods, it instantly goes to the case that it has. So to get started, we're going to create a C# script, and we can call this switch. I'm just going to call it switch. And I'm going to attach this to my example game object, and then we can get coding. So before we start off, I want to introduce you guys to two things that I missed in my if statement video, and that is two special operators that you can use in your if statement to check for any other conditions, and they're normally known as and or or. To work with and, you can normally do just if, let's make a variable real quick, a private integer, num. So if you do if num is equal to 1, and I want to check if it's also greater than 0, which it will be, I would just do if num is equal to 1 and, which is basically shift 7 twice, and num is greater than 0, then we will run the code underneath. So what this is doing, it is checking if number is equal to 0 and if number is greater than 0, which it will be. Now for the or, it's basically the backward slash on your keyboard above the enter key. If you press shift and press it twice, it'll put two straight lines, and this will do a check with or. So it's basically saying if the number is equal to 0 or if the number is greater than 1, then run the code underneath, and it will pass both of these conditions. So that is something I wanted to go over real quick. Now let's get over to the switch statement. So as I said in the introduction, the switch statement is much better when working with large multi-branch situations, like whenever you want to check for specific cases of numbers, like you want something special to happen for 1, for 2, for 3, 4, 5, and so on. So to give an example here, I'll just make a public int, and I can call this my number as an example. And to make our switch statement, we just do switch, and then put in the value we want to evaluate, and in this case it would be my number, so we put it in the parentheses, use two curly braces, and then inside, instead of putting in code we want, we have to put in our case conditions. So for one case, I check if it's 0, so you do case 0, and then a colon, and then after that you type break, and then a semicolon. So what we did here is we basically created a branch for a specific value on our number. So basically, if our number is equal to 0, then if our code runs through the switch statement, it's going to get our 0 case and run the code underneath it over here. And we can do this for as many numbers as we want. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There. So this is what a switch statement would look like. We are basically creating multiple branches for our code executor to instantly go towards using hash table lookups and table lookups. That is how the switch statement works. It uses table lookups instead of continuously evaluating a bunch of conditions, which is something a if-else chain would do. So in each of these little conditions we have here, we could put whatever code we want. So I guess whenever we get 0, we can just say debug.log you got 0 applied by 2 will make 10. There. Just a bunch of small little riddles, I guess. And now we can go back into Unity and test this. Alright, got my example game object here, have my number, I hit play, go to the console, I got 0. Now I set it to 1, and I hit play again, you are number 1. Actually, to make this faster, I'll just put the switch statement in the update method. There you go. Alright, now I hit play and go to the console, and I can change this around. You could see it just goes through every single condition, every single branch I give it. Now let's say you're maybe working with an algorithm or some sort of AI, and you want it to, there's a special case that you want to evaluate for, but you want it to have the same behavior as another case, and that is where the goto keyword comes in. So the goto keyword is basically directing the code executor to go to a specific case. So let's say in case 0, instead of debugging.logging you got 0, I type in goto, and then after my goto keyword I just type goto, and then I put my case, and then let's go to case number 2. So 2, and then my colon, and there you go. And once you put this down, you'll notice that your break has a yellow underline and it says unreachable code detected. And the reason why you get this is because when you run this goto call here, it eliminates the need for the break, because the code executor basically skipped it down to a different case instead of going all the way to the end of the case that it got. So get rid of the break. So now whenever we get 0, it's basically going to say the sum of 1 plus 1. So now let's go back into Unity, test this, and if I clear the console and hit play, so right now it's at 1, it says you are number 1. If I go to 0, it says the sum of 1 plus 1. And this is what the console will say whenever our integer is at the number 2. And if we put my number to 2 again, you'll see we still get the same thing, because 0 has a call that tells the code executor to go into the case where my number is 2. So basically 0 and 2 will run the same code. Alright, and those are the basics of switch statements in Unity. They are very useful for when you want to eliminate the need of creating if-else-if chains, which are generally unoptimized, because once an if-else chain is running, the whole code executor is going to go check for every single condition, and using a switch statement eliminates that lengthy process depending on what your algorithm is like or what your AI is like. So whenever you're making anything that has a lot of branch situations, like what if this happens and then this happens and then this happens, then use a switch statement. So in the next video, I'm going to go over classes and structs, how to use classes and structs, what is a class and what is a struct, etc. And stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in that video. Goodbye.